This is how you swim.
You're swimming, we're diving.
I think that means I'm shallow. All right. Oh, we're dancing now.
Somebody start the episode.
5 minutes later.
Welcome to another episode with the Semi-Sages of the Pages. Today, I'm going to ask some advice from my fellow sages about something that happened to me that I need help with. Okay, so this gets me all up in my feels, and I feel super vulnerable, but I feel like I should ask for advice, and I think this is something a lot of authors can relate to.
Let it out.
Okay. So I was reading one of my really good friend's stories, and she's really excited about it. It's her first novel ever. She's not used to critique. And in it, there was a relationship between a very young girl and a much elderly gentleman. And I didn't want to hurt, I don't want to hurt her feelings. But like, I also don't want a book out there that's saying like
That's okay.
yeah, that like a 12-year-old should be with like a 40-year-old, you know? And so what do authors do when we're faced with these issues that we're reading our friends' manuscripts, somebody we care about, we don't want to hurt their feelings, but we also really feel like we need to, I need to tell her this, right? I need to tell her this.
Yeah. Yes, you need to tell her because she may not realize that there may be some repercussions from those decisions. It's not just your feelings.
I think that's a great point, Teresa. In the general, like, okay, how do I tell my friends or even people I respect, however you want to phrase it, your fellow authors, how do you tell them when something in their work makes you uncomfortable? Especially if it makes you, kind of like Morgan is hinting at, kind of maybe morally uncomfortable or gives you the heebie-jeebies in a way that, like you said, it's not that you want to hurt their feelings, and they're super excited about their work.
For this, I think we need a deep dive. Deep dives with the sages.
And if you don't know what a deep dive is, we're going to analyze the situation as best we can, and we're going to come back for a live where you tell us all the things we missed and jump in the chat and help us sort through this very, very important, very relevant, very timely discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So with our deep dive, where do we start?
Well, I think maybe we can start with examples that we have seen that have maybe made us uncomfortable. So we give people an idea. So you gave one about an unhealthy relationship between ages, right? Other ones that I have seen, right? Unhealthy relationships that are portraying like hurt, harm, abuse as healthy. I've seen that before. It makes me really uncomfortable. Or ones that maybe are leaning into certain stigmas, stereotypes, maybe racial, gender stereotypes, and I don't know if the author is aware or not aware of what they're doing, things like that. What about you, Teresa?
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And that's something as an editor, when I work with my clients, I like to use the, are you aware? Or was this intentional? Or are you aware of perhaps some repercussions, or maybe you might be stirring up some readers' feelings with this? And if they go, yes, great. If not, then we can have a discussion about it and they can make a decision about whether or not they want to move forward. So, real life example. I was editing, okay, it was my dad, I'll be honest. I was editing my dad's book. And I really hope he's okay with me sharing this.
We love you.
I don't know you, but
I love him because he gave us Teresa, so.
that's true.
Aww.
That's true.
So he's shopping his book currently. And it's a sci-fi colonization story. So a bunch of humans are set on a planet with very, very few supplies and have to figure out survival. They cobble together some sort of a government, some sort of a society. And 2-3 months into their colonization, a white girl, 19 years old, is accuses her boyfriend of rape. Okay, except that he's Black. So I said, Dad, are you sure you want to do this? And he said, yes, absolutely, I do, because race shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter. And I said, well, it does.
So then you were like, are you aware?
Exactly.
So that's our theme, right? Are you aware that?
Are you aware? Are you
Challenger.
aware? Yeah.
Yep.
And basically his whole point was, he's like, but I want to set up a society where race doesn't matter. And he said, and I'm using this to kind of like, to actually push people's emotions on this. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's fair. Can you double down on this? And what he ended up doing with it is actually challenging it and having another character challenge this character being African American. And the character's like, I'm not actually Black, I'm Mediterranean. How dare you
That's funny.
assume?
That's fun.
So he actually like was able to actually have a conversation in the book about it, which is a great way to handle it.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's another interesting topic, because challenging someone's identity is another challenging questioning somebody's identity is another kind of hot button, like, ooh, do you want to do that? Are you
Right.
aware of the the traumas people might have associated with that?
Mhm.
Or that people might assume certain things about you.
Yes.
Right.
And they might share those on social media and come after you and share the way that it makes them feel, and are you prepared to deal with those repercussions as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I have a really funny one that
Okay.
happened to me as the writer.
Yep.
I had just taken this workshop where they really focused on making sure that during dialogue, they weren't just like having a dialogue. This is a middle grade chariot racing book.
I know this.
And
I know this story.
character had just gotten like ran over by a chariot, dragged through the mud, whatever, and they have to like get out for the climax and go. And then like they're like mentored teachers, they're helping them get ready. And I did all this research on ancient Rome about how they would heal their wounds so that like when they were on the verge of death, they could actually go back and fight. So I insisted on putting all the details about the types of lotions he would rub on the body and where he would rub them on the body. And my poor friend was like, are you aware that you have like a 60-year-old man rubbing lotion on like a 13-year-old chariot racer, maybe even 11, he was 11 in that scene, for like 3 pages. And I was like, oh, I am not aware. And I was like, no. And my first instinct is, I didn't do that. I would never do that. And then I look at the pages and I was like,
I think that brings up a great point, is right when you're trying to give this uncomfortable feedback to somebody, you have to have some trust in the relationship, and you have to trust that they, as an author, want to know this stuff.
right?
Like, as an author, if I have done something that I am not aware of that makes people uncomfortable and might make many people uncomfortable because I spent 3 pages rubbing lotion on someone, oops, I want to know
So I
that.
knew every herb, right? Every
Yeah.
herb that was actually
You did all the research and you wanted to prove you did the research, which is great. We do that. But if I've done something unintentional, or something that I had a blind spot to or something like that, I want my friends to be able to tell me that. I
Mhm.
want, like, so hopefully when you're uncomfortable as a reader, I think there's kind of 2 options. One, you let the author know, and hopefully they're receptive to that because they don't want that in their book. Or there's B, which is, sometimes as the person reading and giving feedback, you might have to say like, okay, this just isn't for me. like, for example, Morgan gave a really good example. There are plenty of books that have relationships where there is a large age gap between a couple. Or where there is
Like for
a
me, any
relation
kind of animal torture.
yeah. Uh relationships that start out as like kidnapping or abuse or like Stockholm
Mhm.
syndrome kind of stuff are really hard for me. And I understand that's the premise of the book. They probably don't want to change that. There's probably an audience for that, but that audience might just not be me. And I
Right.
might just be okay just to be like, listen, so and so, I want to support you. That's great. But I can't, this book isn't for me. It touches upon stuff that is really just hard for me to read and to be around. So I wish you the best, but I'm going to step back here.
Yeah. And there's a lot of validity in that too. There's also validity in when you offer your work up, especially if it's going to have some hot topics in there, warning people and being like, hey, just so you know, there's a rape scene in this. You okay with that? Or, just and I know people don't necessarily love the idea of trigger warnings and that type of thing, but I feel like for your readers, your beta readers who aren't able to read a book description ahead of time, letting them know, hey, this deals with some pretty severe mental health stuff. This deals with suicide. Just giving them a heads up can really help. And so that way it gives them grace to be like, not for me. Thank you though. Wish you the best. I'll read your next one.
I wonder what that does for censorship. Since we're doing deep dives and pushback.
Ah,
I wonder what
great.
that does for like being able to keep the books out of libraries or limit access to things, because when we're categorizing that content level, then we make it easy for society to police what
Well,
people are reading. And I'm using the word police very
yeah.
please
Yeah.
don't read into that. Like,
Okay, so I have a great example for that. So when I wrote River City Widows, I really wanted my main character, Tasia, to really mentally battle with her stepdaughter. Tasia was being influenced, and I really wanted that influence to kind of go to a dark place. So mentally having her treat her stepdaughter a certain way and having that kind of ripple out a little bit in some of the behavior, but most of it was going to be inner monologue. And I had a beta reader who told me, no, absolutely not. I hate Tasia. What a horrible human being. She should never, ever talk about her stepdaughter that way, which of course I now realize she was probably triggered by that
but,
behavior.
and were you thinking, like, just to get in your head and understand
Yeah.
more, were you thinking you were gonna arc her out of it? Like part of her influence was part of the plot.
Yeah.
And so like
Yes,
this isn't who she really was. And so you wanted to show that darkness to actually build on the plot.
exactly.
So what did you do? Did you end up going with her advice, or did you listen to yourself, or how did you make the decision?
I went with her advice. I couldn't stand the idea that someone would think me, Teresa, would think that way about a stepdaughter. I don't have a stepdaughter, but I was so uncomfortable with this idea that somebody might confuse me with Tasia and be like, oh, Teresa's a horrible human being. That I scaled it back. And I actually kind of, I'm a much better writer now. I actually kind of regret that.
So do you think, like talking about feelings,
Mm-hmm.
do you think it was good she gave you the feedback? Like, or do you appreciate the feedback?
I do, except knowing what I know now, I probably would have taken it differently and probably pushed back and been like, and realized her reaction was so emotional that it had to do around her feelings about step siblings or something like that, because it was such a strong reaction. I should have realized that was her issue, not necessarily an issue with the book. And I should have had more conversation about it and pushed a little harder and been like, well, this is where I think I'm trying to go with it. So
I think that's really good advice for writers too, is that we take the criticism too raw and that we need to like sit on it and see if we can separate it and find out if it's true for us in our book. And, I've heard great advice, take 24 hours, take 48 hours. Or I like to sometimes go ask somebody else who's read the book, that's a writer, that knows the plotter, has been with me longer. Like, I like to have one writer who kind of goes with me all the way through and then check them. Teresa, did you try anything like that?
No, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, but
Yeah.
that's how censorship happens.
Yeah.
The author makes an intentional decision and wants to push the envelope. This is art. We are talking about art. We are talking about emotions. We are talking about human experiences. Those are not always positive. And sometimes we do need to push. We need to talk about the things that we don't want to talk about because it helps people process things. It helps us hold mirrors up to society and be like, society, is this really who you want yourself to be? But authors need to be aware that they're doing that and do it with intentionality and not be scared about repercussions about that, or they have to be prepared for those repercussions themselves.
Yeah, we might be a little scared, but willing to risk it anyway, right?
Willing to risk it
Yeah.
I
anyways.
think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole can of worms to open up on this topic when you start talking about, what topics do authors write on and what topics should different people write about if it's not from their lived experience or not from their lived background, and how do you write about that respectfully, or do you get to write about that at all? Do you get to write about characters with different skin color or different gender or different backgrounds? How do you do that? How do you get to do that? And I've certainly had discussions with other writer friends about what is appropriate or not, and dealt with people self-censoring, sometimes for very maybe good reasons, because someone stepped back and said, oh, I don't understand this. And other times I've had people step back and they didn't have a reason to not include maybe that diversity, other than that they felt uncomfortable doing it. Right? Then that's a form of
Interesting.
self-censorship.
What an interesting look at the word get to. Where does that goes to Teresa and her mirror, the mirror example that we as artists hold up the mirrors, and it's like, where does this idea of get to? Everyone's like Captain Jack Sparrow, either a man can or he can't.
What a man can't do, what a can do.
But there's some fun in that too, to Teresa's point, where is this fine line between I want to respect my reader and I don't want to trigger them, I don't want to give them an extra trauma, but I also don't want them to be in their little bubble where they can only have their own echo chamber and never express and stretch and learn. And we're constantly caught in the crossroads of these two things that both are valid and both are important. And ultimately, every author has to pick their own path,
And I think it's important to remember that readers are allowed to not read your book, or they're allowed to put your book down. It's allowed to not be for them. And you, at the same time, don't have to cater to everyone. You get to be okay by saying, you know what? And it's really, really hard sometimes because you want to please people and you want to take your feedback that you get from people and make them happy and adjust. And sometimes you have to be like, no, I'm going to intentionally do this thing, which might lose me readers, but it's my vision.
I'm staying true to my work. I'm staying true to my art. I am the creator. I have final say.
So when it comes back to hurt feelings, we've got to kind of know where we sit, in our truth, where our truth is. But I think going back to Teresa's advice, we can always start with the very simple question of are you aware? And then let go, let them write what they want to write, and you write what you want to write, and use the information to make the best decisions. And you don't have to agree with yourself 10, 15 years later. You're going to change and grow, I hope, and they're going to change and grow, I hope. And hopefully you're going to disagree with us when you come back for the deep dive live, which will be in a few weeks. Hopefully you're thinking about different ways we can talk about both feelings and censorship and this really delicate crossroads that we're all walking between making people feel comfortable, but also pushing the bounds of uncomfortability. And maybe it's okay that we feel passionate and uncomfortable. And maybe it's good. Maybe even we should seek it out and embrace it. So I'm sure we'll have
Ooh.
lots more to say about that in our next live. If you want to fire this up, join us on Discord. Where else can they find us?
Check out our website, www.semistagesofthepages.com. It has links to all of our stuff.
All right. So what are y'all still doing here? Go
Go
right.
right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Teresa.
Like blooper at the end. Sometimes I throw those in.
You want me to do it again? Deep dives with the sages.